Hello, Create Schools. Today we're going to take a look at the Treaty of Versailles and the German reaction to the Treaty of Versailles. So just first take a think about it. How would you feel if all of those things would have been done to you? Would you say, okay, yes, well, it's our fault, we'll go ahead and accept it? Or would you say, hey, wait a minute, that's just, a little too much. You're trying to cripple us and make us not happy. So anyway, let's take a look. Go ahead and get out your paper and pencil and write this down, your topic and your title. Pause if you need to write that down. Not, I'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so here's your German reaction. Write just the German reaction, and I've got a political cartoon up there. So this is all of chapter 1 is told in political cartoons. So here we have a French person with the terms. The German people must pay all the damages to the civilians on land or sea or from the air. We've got our German reacting there. We know this is a German by his hat. Okay, and he's like, oh no, what's going on? So, and then a newspaper article in the bottom left, the demonstration of Berlin against the treaty of the terms of the treaty. Lots of people there unhappy. So if you had guessed that the Germans were unhappy about it, you are correct. Okay, so now we're going to specifically look at all of the things and the reasons why they were upset. Here is a depiction that is that vampire is Clemenceau, and as you remember, he is the French leader at the time of the Treaty of Versailles, and he is sucking all of the lifeblood out of the German people. That lady represents the German people. I'll share this as a group of slides as well, and so you can go ahead and click right here and get a whole bunch of political cartoons on the reactions if you want to find out some more. So the war guilt clause and reparations. This is probably one of the worst parts of the Treaty of Versailles. The war guilt clause was massively hated by the Germans. They felt that the blame should be shared. It was totally unfair that they are the ones who had to blame or take the blame for all of World War I. In fact, the people who finally signed the treaty, they were called the November criminals. So that gives you a little key that it was signed in November. And reparations, they were upset that they had to pay for all of the damage, even though their own economy was weakened. So we talked a little bit about that in the last video about the terms. So the next slide, if you haven't finished taking, you do not need to write this part here. That's just information about this, since I found this a very interesting how they took Clemenceau and made him a vampire. It's really obvious Clemenceau, even though he was a shriveled old vampire. So once you've taken these notes, go on to continue. If you haven't taken the notes, take a pause. Okay, disarmament. That is the next huge thing that the Germans were upset. A little spoiler alert for chapter 3, it is actually the reason why Hitler and Germany leave the League of Nations. So disarmament. The army was too small to defend Germany, and the 14 points called for everyone to disarm, but no allies had to disarm the same way Germans. So I found this little political cartoon that's in German. So here is the people all bound together. Here is Frankreich with the chain that holds the chain of Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and also a teeny tiny to Germany. Says how many soldiers and how many reserves. As you can see, this huge Germany has very few people to defend themselves if all of them decide to go and attack Germany. Now, I understand the fact that they didn't want Germany to attack, but to be defended, you should be allowed to defend yourself, and that's why Germany was really upset. So pause if you haven't finished those notes. If not, come with me to the next page. Okay, so Germany was also upset by their loss of territories. They lost a huge economic area, both the Saar and the Upper Sicily, which were extremely important areas for them. It's the way that the Germans would have been able to repay their reparations. but they were unable to because they also lose a lot of money. And they also thought it was very unfair that Britain and France were growing greater with their empires. So I found this political cartoon. It says, "Now, gents, which portion am I to carve for you?" And so Germany's the big fat pig that they're carving up to split Germany up. So Germany's getting smaller and their empires are getting huge. And of course, that would make Germany very upset. If the areas would have had self-determination and have chosen to be independent, like Wilson wanted, Germans probably would have been way less upset. So pause here if you need to copy those down. If not, come with me to the next slide. Okay, so the 14 points in the League of Nations. The treatment of Germany was not keeping within Wilson's 14 points. Self-determination was not given to the German people, and they were not allowed to join even. And so here's a little satire, a political cartoon of the 14 points. Wilhelm, he was been the German guy in charge, and says, "It's the only way out, Wilhelm. You have to practice the principles of the 14 points of peace," but yet the Treaty of Versailles was not keeping to the 14 peace points. And finally, non-representation. It was really unfair. They felt like they were going to the guillotine and had no choice to get their heads cut off. This is a German cartoon here, and they just thought it was very unfair that they were not being represented, and also that they were being punished, and they weren't the only people that did it. Oh, they also felt that they actually didn't lose the war. It was an armistice. They all agreed to stop fighting, but Germany knew that if they went ahead and didn't sign and they kept fighting, they would end up losing later. So they hadn't lost the game yet. They declared the war over before Germany had actually lost. Okay, go ahead and take those notes. You do not need to write this information over here. This is just information for you about it. So if you wish to take a look at that. And I believe that's the last one. Yep, so we will look in our next video about the impact of the Treaty of Versailles. So if you have any questions, please let me know.